Joe Biden isn't only using his weaponized DOJ to go after conservatives and Republicans like Donald Trump, he's now also going after Democrats and progressives, specifically those who are pro-life. And just this week, several of these pro-life activists received sentencing in federal prison up to 5 years for simply preventing people from going to murder their babies at an abortion clinic. Now, I think this is outrageous. So I brought in my very first guest of this podcast, who is a presidential candidate on the Democrat ticket. We'll get into it all right here on the Battle Belongs podcast. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Battle Belongs podcast. I'm your host, Coleton Furlow. Happy Friday. I hope your week has gone well so far. Today's a very special day because I have my first guest ever on the Battle Belongs podcast. It's week 3, episode 3, and I thought, it's time to have someone else join the discussion here. And what better way to have a very first guest than to bring on a presidential candidate? Now, it's no one that you're even thinking of, and you've probably actually never even heard her name, but she has an amazing story. She is a warrior and an activist on a very specific issue that I truly care about. It's the number one issue that I discuss on my social media platforms, and it's something that I've just been really getting involved with, not as much as she has. She's become a true warrior in this fight, but that is the issue and topic of abortion. Now, many of you probably know my full stance on abortion, but probably don't know how I actually became pro-life and the story behind it all. And I really won't get into much of it because we're going to have her join the podcast. But growing up, I was a Christian. I'm still a Christian, obviously. And I actually wasn't fully pro-life. I was actually probably only 50% against abortion. I was okay for abortions with rape, incest, the life of the mother, quote unquote, and you'll hear more about that specific part later. And also for pregnancies where the baby might have Down syndrome or missing an arm or missing a leg or just something like that, I was actually okay with abortions for that. And throughout time, there's just one story where one of my teachers we were just talking about the topic of abortion, and she was telling us a story, and she was just kind of giving like insight into it so that we can shape our own opinion, and she wasn't forcing anything. She was just giving her life experience, and she was talking about how she was pregnant and the baby was going to have like complications. I don't really remember exactly what was going to be wrong with the baby, and she was basically encouraged, or at least given the option, to have an abortion. And she chose life. She was like, no, like whatever this baby has, however this baby comes out, it's going to be my baby. I'm going to love it. And she says, and this person. And it was like one of my best friends at the time in high school. And I heard that and I was just like dumbfounded. I was shocked. I cried. I just like wanted to go up and give her a hug. And in that moment, I became pro-life for any complications that a baby had, because no matter what complication, no matter if it's Down syndrome, whatever it may be, that life is as valuable as a normal, healthy baby. And turns out when she was born, there was nothing wrong with her whatsoever. So a lot of these doctors get it wrong, and just praise God that everything just went smooth, that she chose life. And I had a best friend out of the option to choose life. So I became pro-life in that regard. And then I just, started hearing stories from other people who have either been conceived from rape or who have actually been raped and had a baby and they chose life. And all of that just made me become fully pro-life, 100% with no exceptions, because I don't think there's ever an exception to kill an innocent human life whatsoever. Every life is as valuable as the next life, and I'm just so excited to bring in this guest so that we can discuss more about it. But just a quick little, housekeeping thing. I'm a little sick. So I just woke up, sore throat. So I'm sorry if I sound any different than normal. I can't breathe through my nose at all either. And I have a tennis tournament tomorrow up in Wilmington, North Carolina. Well, today. When it's released, it's today. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I have a tennis tournament up there, and I just hope that I don't pass out or anything, because the last tournament I had was actually way back in 2022, and I had to play with the flu. And it was 96 degrees, and I thought surely that was going to be my last day on Earth, because I was just beat while playing. And then I just got slaughtered during the tennis matches. So hopefully tomorrow's another day. Next week, I have another amazing guest joining the show, Lucas Miles, who is the host, or not the host, he is the author of The Christian Left. And this topic that we're going to be discussing today will also tie into next week. So it's basically about how the radical left has tried to change biblical truth, and how they're just reshaping the culture, and how society is just having a downfall and crumbling because we've taken God out. We've tried to change the Bible and all that jazz. So I want to give that plug. Before we get into this episode, I think it's time to bring in the very first guest of the Battle Belongs podcast, Terrisa Bukovinac. She is an amazing woman. She is running for president on the Democrat ticket. There's probably nothing else that we can agree on politically except the issue of abortion. She's out here, and I'm over here. She's very progressive. I'm very conservative. I don't think there's really an issue that we'll have common ground on, except this issue. And I've met with her and her team at Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising several times during rallies, and they are just amazing people. And it's just so good to see in times like these where we can have common ground and fight for just moral, basic truths that life begins at conception, and all life should be protected inside the womb because they are innocent humans out there. So I just want you to listen to what she has to say, because her story is truly amazing and inspiring. And the reasons why she's running for Democrat isn't really what you would ever think to imagine hearing from a presidential candidate. She's not running to win. She's running to change minds, and I love it. So take a listen. All right, so let's bring in now Terrisa Bukovinac. We're going to skip the formalities because she has a very busy day on the Hill today. But Terrisa, thank you for joining me on the Battle Belongs podcast.
Thanks so much, Coleton. It's an honor to be here.
All right, so Terrisa was actually the person who joined this podcast when it was just in the startup, and I had to send in a sample video to the team just so it could get approved. So you're kind of like the reason that this is actually happening. So thank you. But I just want to know, just tell me about yourself. Aside from the activist Terrisa, aside from candidate Terrisa, who are you?
I am a girl from Michigan. I moved to Atlanta when I was 19 and just wanted to have an adventure and explore life. And I'm a musician. I am an artist. And I eventually moved to San Francisco. And I'm really into fashion. I worked in the fashion industry for a long time before getting involved in the pro-life movement. And of course, I'm a Democrat and an atheist, and perhaps that's what you were kind of looking for. But
no, that's all good. I just wanted to know like the personal who you are. So that was all good. So you bring up that you're an atheist, that you're a Democrat, which brings me to my next question. You know, most people in America who you see on the mainstream news who are Democrats, who are atheists, who don't believe in God, all of that, they're usually pro-choice. But this is something that you and I have common ground on. You know, there's not much that Republicans and Democrats or progressives and conservatives can find common ground on. But between me and you, we have a very common ground opinion on what is behind abortion, what abortion is. It's murder. So can you explain to me how you got to be involved in the pro-life anti-abortion movement and why you actually became pro-life?
Yeah, it is kind of a long story that has been culminating over the last many years. But I used to be a meat-eating, pro-choice Christian. I've always been pretty left-leaning. My family was not super political growing up. My parents didn't vote. And so, as a young person, a lot of young people gravitate towards more leftist politics, which I did. But as I got older, and more involved in the church and things like that, I eventually started to lose my faith in my religion. And when I no longer believed in heaven or like a life after death or like a God who was going to right all the wrongs in the end, I really started to rethink some of these moral issues. And, for me, I would think about how, rare this conscious experience is that I'm having in this life, and how the unborn are already in a place where they exist and are developing this consciousness. And, from my perspective, that's their only opportunity to have that. And I started really having some conflicting feelings about abortion. Um, it really wasn't until I discovered the group Secular Pro-Life, though, that I realized that there are other pro-lifers like me, because I thought I had some reservations about abortion, but I thought, well, I'm not pro-life. I'm not a religious conservative. But realizing that there were other secular people out there like Christopher Hitchens, Nat Hentoff, that were deeply opposed to abortion, but also, secular people, atheists, really. That gave me the confidence to be openly pro-life and to identify that way. And then over the course of some years, being exposed to the videos that David Daleiden released in 2015 that were just so gut-wrenching and horrifying, showing top-level Planned Parenthood executives haggling over the prices of baby body parts and how to do abortions in certain ways to crush certain body parts to obtain the fetal tissue and their organs. And it broke something in me. And I thought, I really need to do something about this. And I was especially concerned that the voices of pro-life people at that point was Trump, who was running for president. We had no idea at that point that he was going to win. But I thought, there's no way someone like Trump can reach people in my community in San Francisco, right, secular people, leftist people. Like, this is only going to drive them further away from this very life and death issue. And that's really kind of when I just decided that, look, I can't just be frustrated and angry that no one's representing me if I'm not willing to go out and be that representation for people like me. So I started my first organization at that point, Pro-Life San Francisco. And then some years after that, I became the president of Democrats for Life of America. And now, and then after that, I founded Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising.
All right. So let me ask you, were you kind of, when you first realized that you're against abortion, were you like all in against like basically every instance, or were you lenient at some point, and did it progressively get to be like where you are now, fully anti-abortion?
Well, I would say that, there was some kind of like, oh, well, maybe just late-term abortions are bad. Right. There was some sense of that. But once I really, especially discovered secular pro-life and realized, there was all of these, there was a lot of content that they had created, secular content explaining, the principles of protecting life in the womb, and recognizing that, like, if we're trying to establish some equality between humankind, then that has to extend not just to late-term abortion victims, but to all members of our human family. That to do otherwise would be ageist, ableist, and just really out of the bounds of human equality. So I would say pretty early on in my career, like I didn't, by the time I'd started Pro-Life San Francisco, I was fully identifying as pro-life and anti-abortion.
There's still a lot of people out there who call themselves Christians, and they have this idea that what I had growing up, abortion's okay in certain instances. What's your message for things like, especially like rape or incest, and people always say the life of the mother? What's your message to those people who think that's still okay?
Well, my message to them is that you are still pro-life. I think it is so important that people understand that opposing abortion, generally speaking, is attacking elective abortion, this institution that kills healthy babies, that are inside their healthy pregnant parent. And I think that so often I meet people who think that they're pro-choice because of the exceptions that you just
Right.
mentioned. And I feel like it is a barrier because, as pro-lifers, we definitely want people to see the value in all of these lives. And, we're acutely aware of the horrors of the actual practice of the procedure. And I completely understand why pro-life people, and including myself, want to discourage anyone, from having even those abortions that wouldn't necessarily be considered elective. Of course, the entire pro-life movement supports exceptions in the case where the mother's life or the parent's life is in danger. So that is, I've noticed too that a lot of pro-choice people think that that's not true. And often when people will question me about that and say, well, what about the life of the mother? And I'm responding like, yes, we have to meet her needs. But the question that they're really asking is, does her life come first? And I think that we need to do a better job of articulating that,
Right.
that yes, we do support that. And I really think that, while there are sensitive feelings about abortion in these other exceptional cases, I think we need to keep people who have those beliefs on our side, instead of like giving them over to a side that is so barbarically pushing for late term abortion. And I think that the likelihood of people becoming more and more pro-life over time is something that I've observed over the years in the movement. And I think just bringing them to our side is the most important thing, getting them to recognize that they are pro-life. Like, if there are people who think that most abortions are okay, but that late-term abortions should be illegal, I really want to capture that group of people. That group of people is going to help us have a huge victory for late-term babies. So I really want to bring them into our pro-life family.
Yeah,
and keep.
you bring up a good point, because one of the things that just frustrates me the most within the Republican Party, the GOP, and the candidates is that they really suck at articulating their point and the reasoning behind why they're pro-life, and no one really seems to understand what the pro-life laws are. And when they're questioned about it, like instances with the mother's life in danger, they don't know how to answer it. And I don't know if you've ever listened to Allie Beth Stuckey talk about this issue, but when she talks about the life of the mother, I think she just puts it so perfectly that it's the doctor's duty that, let's say, an ectopic pregnancy, non-viable, things like that, it's the doctor's duty to still try to have the baby delivered, because it's got to come out at some point. Try to have it delivered healthy, try to keep it alive. But if worse comes to worse, to save the mother's life, the pregnancy has to be terminated. And I think that's where people are just, just confused on the whole issue. And if we can articulate it more, like you said, I think there'll be more common ground and people can understand just how bad this is. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like 96% of abortions are just elective birth control.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's like the message that we can all just come together on. And the more that we talk to people and, break it down by issue within abortion, the more pro-life that they actually realize that they are. So let me transition, because I was just talking about candidates and GOP and not being able to articulate it. You're the only Democrat candidate running for president who can articulate this message so perfectly. So what made you decide to run? I didn't even know you were old enough to run. I thought you were like 25. So when I heard that you were running, I was like, geez. So props to you for that. So just tell me a little bit why you decided to run for president.
So in 2020, during the 2020 election cycle, I took to the road. I went to every single Democratic debate. I was just so frustrated with the party's censorship of pro-life Democrats. We are a third of the party, and most Democrats have serious reservations about elective late-term abortion. And I just thought, I've got to go to these debates. I've got to make my voice heard. I've got to gather other people, show them that we are still, pressuring the party to change and to recognize us and to represent us. And then I did some work with Democrats for Life of America, got a little bit more involved, like politically in general, lobbying. And then in after founding Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, because I wanted to have this very partisan group that could really just kind of help move the Democratic Party on this issue. We know that the Democratic Party is not really influenced that heavily by establishment Democrats or blue dog Democrats. It's progressives. And so my goal was to organize people like me that have more progressive politics, but who are deeply opposed to abortion, and to give them a voice. And then just a few months after I established that group, my colleague Lauren Handy and I recovered the remains of 115 aborted babies outside the Washington Surgery Center in Washington, D.C., a very notorious abortion center run by Cesare Santangelo. Inside the box, it included in the 115 were 5 post-viability babies. So, 3 of them were basically whole. One of them, which indicates that they may have been born alive, and at that late gestational age, it's just very likely that they were born alive and left to die. One of the baby girls, Harriet, had the back of her neck cut, and where her brain had been suctioned out, and her skull had been crushed, which is the hallmark wound of a partial birth abortion, which is also a federal crime along with infanticide. And this experience of pulling the broken bodies of these murdered children out of this box was the most soul-crushing experience of my life. And so when I was preparing to go through another election cycle last summer, I thought, how can I do this? I can't go through another election cycle just demanding representation once again if I am not willing to get out there and do it. Now, I'm not a sitting governor or member of Congress. I don't have a pathway to any kind of real victory in terms of becoming president or winning this election or primary. I am running for 2 reasons: to continue to put pressure on the Democratic Party to show them that we are not going away and that we are going to continue to build our pro-life leftist movement brick by brick until there is victory for the unborn. But more importantly, or maybe not more importantly, but more immediately, I am using this campaign as a way to draw attention to this discovery that I made of these 5 children. They still have not had an autopsy. And these are the faces of late-term elective abortion in the United States. If we are ever going to pass a national ban in this country, it is going to be because people see the victims and recognize that this is violence. It's the same method that's used by any other social justice movement that's ever been successful in the history of the world using nonviolent means. We have to show the people what these children look like, show them the victims. And so as a federal candidate, my ads cannot be censored by law. So I was on the ballot in New Hampshire. We ran 12 ads during Jimmy Fallon's show and The View. And I had an op-ed in the paper, and I outperformed more than half of the lesser known candidates on the Democratic primary. And the ones that did beat me, most of them actually live in New Hampshire. So it was pretty remarkable, considering I did absolutely zero ground campaigning, because like I said, this is not a real campaign. I'm not a politician, I'm an activist. And now I'm on the ballot in New Jersey, and I am Joe Biden's only challenger. So voters in New Jersey have to pick between me and Joe Biden. And if I get even 15% of the vote in any county, I will be able to send a delegate to the DNC. So it's actually culminating into something really great. And the campaign did run an ad in New York. Because I'm on the ballot in New Jersey, I can run ads in the largest media market in the world. And I ran graphic ads of the 5 on the Today Show. Now we're trying to run more ads. This is what the campaign is about, but we need money. And so the max donation is $3,300. If you can give $3,300, that is going to go to ads. And if you have specific requests about specific ads or shows that you want us to run on, we will do it. But please just go to my website, Terrisa2024.com, and help me show the American people in this very critical election cycle the violence that is the status quo in this nation.
Wow, I love it. And I got to tell you that I've seen some of the ads that you've ran. I believe you posted them on social media, and they are gut-wrenching to watch. But if you're not against abortion after watching these, and you're still not against abortion, I don't know what's wrong with some of these people, because they're so gut wrenching to watch, but they're just so eye opening to, the truth behind the abortion industry. Now, let me ask you, I feel like on the Republican side, there's much more openness to debate the topic around abortion. A lot of people have different stages of life before they have like a cutoff date. Some say 15 weeks, 24 weeks, whatever it may be. But I feel like the Democrat side, they don't really have a discussion. They just kind of file in line to just be for abortion up till birth, no strings attached, basically. So is that true? And also, has any of the candidates, like Joe Biden, the Miriam Williamson, I believe I'm saying her name correctly, have they said anything to you? Have they wanted to have a conversation to, find common ground on this, or is it just like kicking you to the curb?
Well, there is a campaign by the pro-abortion side, which is called No Airtime for Antis. And so, the Democratic establishment will do anything, in my opinion, to silence pro-life Democrats. That's a big problem for them. And you can see that they primary any candidates aggressively who espouse any kind of concern about even late-term abortion. Like, I remember Andrew Yang in the last presidential election saying something about abortion as a tragedy. And even though he's totally pro-choice, he was totally criticized for that. And I'm sure that criticism has stayed with him since then. So they're going to try to ignore my campaign as much as possible. I did have a confrontation with Marianne Williamson in New Hampshire at the State House when we were both filing. And she seemed interested at first in having a conversation, but then when she realized it was about abortion, she was just like, well, you have your opinion and I have mine. And you're absolutely right. Like, they in no way want to debate this. It is very problematic for them because their arguments aren't really that good. And, I recently had the honor and privilege of introducing the the secular pro-life position to Peter Singer's practical ethics class at Princeton. He's the most famous moral philosopher in the world. He's super pro-abortion. And I debated Frances Kissling there, who many may remember. She's a big pro-abortion Catholic. So it was a very interesting interaction. But the reality is that abortion is killing. And when you show a class, when you show people like really the pictures of what this actually comes to, it is shocking to them. And I read articles later from people who were covering that class at Princeton who really felt moved by that presentation and thought, oh, maybe I don't support abortion. And that's what they fear. And like, even wedging in a little ways, even weakening the abortion industry could tumble it to the ground. So it's so important that we're taking every opportunity to get around the censorship and find unique, creative ways to have an impact on this election, not just on the Democratic Party, but on the GOP as well, who desperately needs the message that the American people care about this issue, and they cannot be mistaken about that.
Right, and you bring up a pro-choice Catholic. That just blows my mind. I can understand someone who's not a person of faith to be pro-abortion. I get it. But as a Christian, and I know you weren't necessarily like pro-life while you were in the church, but as a Christian, I think it's fully laid out to us in the Bible what is right and what is wrong, and how anyone who can claim to be a Christian, especially like Joe Biden as a Catholic, supports abortion just absolutely blows my mind, and I'll never understand it. And when you dig deep with them, they can't even articulate or argue their position either. So before I let you go, I want to talk about the breaking news that has happened. You had a few friends that I've met at these pro-life and anti-abortion rallies who are just amazing people who just want to save human lives. So a few of them were arrested a while back, but they were just sentenced. So just give me the rundown of exactly what happened.
Well, in October of 2020, several activists, including my colleague Lauren Handy and Herb Garrity, they engaged in what we call a rescue. This is a nonviolent direct action tactic that has been used throughout the pro-life movement, really having a major impact on the 80s and 90s. Now, the tactic of rescue back then was to blockade abortion clinics and to prevent people from entering the killing centers, treating it as you would an actual killing center anywhere in the world. And I'm sure you can imagine in some historic events that have happened where we think, wow, I would totally not allow that to happen. And yet every day these killing centers, people go in and out, and most pro-life people just drive right by them. But some very brave people who have studied the science of social justice and understand that nonviolent direct action is, again, another critical element to success. And so Lauren and Herb, along with 7 others, went to the Washington Surgery Center, which is the site where 2 years later, Lauren and I did recover what's come to be known as the DC-5. They did this rescue there in 2020. There was a blockade, but not all of them were blocking, and it didn't last very long. It was peaceful. They weren't assaulting anyone or anything like that. But a clinic worker sprained her ankle while she was attempting to push them out of the clinic. And so they have labeled this a violent rescue, a violent action. And so the federal government indicted them under the FACE Act, which is the Freedom to Access Clinic Entrances Act, enacted in the 90s to address the direct action that was so critical to forming the pro-life party that we have in the United States. So the federal government, Biden's DOJ, Merrick Garland's DOJ, has come down so hard on pro-life activists since Roe, and this is since Roe was overturned, and it's in the face of more than 70 attacks on pregnancy centers by pro-abortion activists, which are also supposed to be protected under the FACE Act. So we have like more than 100 people being indicted under the FACE Act who are pro-life, and 2 who are pro-choice. It is a complete weaponization of this law against peaceful pro-life people. And so this week, now back in the fall is when the trial was, and the defendants were all told that they would have time to get their affairs in order, that they would, they wouldn't go to jail until sentencing. But the government said that because it was a violent crime, that they had to be taken to jail right away. And so they didn't have any time to say goodbye to anyone. They had to go to jail right away. And that was 9 months ago. They're all still in jail, and they just got sentenced this week. Lauren was given 57 months in prison, and Herb was given 27 months in federal prison for what anyone in their right mind would normally classify as a totally nonviolent, peaceful resistance to legal child killing. These people are heroes. And, some of them are grandparents. Some of them are in their 70s. Some of them have very serious health problems. Heather Idoni, for example, had a stroke. She has had a stroke while incarcerated right now. She was just in the hospital a couple days ago, and now she has COVID, and she is a grandmother. She has 5 biological children. She adopted 10 children from Ukraine. She is desperately needed home with her family, but instead the federal government is trying to make an example of her. And so we are hoping that people will call your members of Congress, let them know we want the FACE Act repealed, and we want these prisoners freed. If and when Trump is reelected as president, we want him to pardon them as one of the first things that he does. And that's only going to happen if people call their members and make sure that it does not get off the radar of the GOP's agenda.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And the thing that ticks me off the most about all of this is you see the lunatics on the college campuses right now who are actually violent, who are actually committing hate crimes against Jewish students. That is being applauded by the left. They are excited about that, and they encourage it. Yet when people just want to save human lives from being murdered, they talk about genocide on these college campuses, that Israel's committing genocide. They're not. But the real genocide is inside the womb, and they're just completely silent about that. And these people are the ones who get arrested and sentenced for bogus reasons. just because they want to save lives. Okay, so last question. What is your message to Donald Trump? Because he is the pro-life candidate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So what is your message to him on how to cultivate this message and to galvanize the pro-life movement going into the election? Because I think he's struggling a little bit right now regarding it.
Yeah, I think that he needs to listen to his base, that this is a core issue of the Republican Party. And I am not a fan of the Republican Party, but in my opinion, the only real moral ground that the party is standing on, which is a really high moral ground, right, is that this party is opposed to the genocide of the unborn. And I want to encourage Trump to obviously pardon the rescuers, but to also work vigorously to pass a national ban that would protect at least babies who are being aborted for elective reasons in the late second and third trimester. I think that is a place where most Americans are, and there's absolutely no reason for the GOP to be backing away from that. That should be the lowest hanging fruit for the party. And I think that obviously the FACE Act needs to be repealed. There is clearly a double standard in the way that pro-life activists are being treated in this country and have been for decades. And, I'm going to also say that Donald Trump needs to do a rescue. He needs to put his body on the line for the unborn, to set the example for the rest of this country. We are never going to end abortion in all 50 states until, once again, thousands of regular, everyday people are willing to go to the killing centers and say no more. We are not standing for this. We are going to put our bodies in between the oppressor and the oppressed. And it is going to take someone with an incredible amount of courage and with an enormous public platform, right, to show Republicans that being polite, being law-abiding, I understand that's like a Republican thing, but you got to set that aside when it comes to child killing. And the kind thing to do here is to end it. And someone like Donald Trump could really make a difference in terms of that. So I want to invite Donald to come to my next rescue, and DM me. We'll work it out. I'll hopefully give you a plan to do a rescue and change the world.
That's such a bold invitation, but I love it. It's such a great idea. Okay, so I said that was the last question. I lied. This is it. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. So presumably, Joe Biden's going to be the nominee of the Democrat Party. Are you a one-issue voter this election? Would you vote for Donald Trump if it came down to it regarding the issue of life?
I am not going to vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Okay. I am a conscientious voter, and I believe that the key to getting the Democratic Party to change isn't just to become a Republican or to vote Republican. It is to show them that I'm a Democrat and I am withholding my vote from them, that I will not be complicit in their child killing agenda, and that it is so, I'm trying to set the example for other pro-life Democrats that they must not be complicit. And it's a lot harder of a message to convey if you're like, well, I'm just going to vote for Trump, or, trying to get them to vote for Trump. The message is lost. We are Democrats. We do not agree with Republican policies, but we will not be complicit in child killing. That is the message. That's what I'm trying to raise up these pro-life Democrats, to give them the courage to say who they are, to stop being silenced, to stop being afraid. I mean, we live in America. We are not going to get executed on sight for espousing views that are unpopular.
Right. Not yet.
We're not even going to be given the death penalty for rescuing. These rescuers, yes, these are harsh penalties. And I know that might scare a lot of people. And I'm not talking, not every rescue comes with that kind of risk. Okay. They did a blockade. That's different. There's other types of rescues. There's other types of ways that people can sacrifice for this cause. But we must make these kinds of sacrifices, or nothing is going to change. And I just want to encourage people to have the courage to do that, because even if you did something really brand like a blockade and you're facing 27 months in federal prison, you're going to get out.
Right.
Like, the lack of courage around this in the United States is concerns me as an activist, that there are just so many people laying down their lives in other countries for issues that aren't even as grave as the one that we're in. So I really want to encourage people to be bold. And maybe that just starts with telling your friends, like, hey, I don't agree. I do think that abortion is wrong. I don't want to get into it. You don't have to debate everyone. Just say you disagree. But then the second step is to go to my website, Terrisa2024.com, and to find more out about the campaign, watch the ad, and please make a contribution so that we can show people. I'll take the heat for you. I'll show the American people what the dead babies look like, and they can get mad
I
at
think
me.
that was like the most perfect response to that question, and I respect it 100%. Okay, so you mentioned your website. Where can people follow you on social media?
At Terrisa Lynn. My first name is spelled a little different. It's Terrisa. I didn't pick it. It's my parents' fault.
Yeah,
But
mine's spelled differently too, so we're in the same boat.
oh, right, okay, yeah. So it's Terrisa Lynn, Lin. So TerrisaLin. That's my handle. Twitter and Instagram. Please follow me. I'm really fun to follow. I'm cool.
I
I'm
agree.
funny, and I'm really version.
I 100% agree. Well, Terrisa, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Thank you for everything that you do for the pro-life movement. And I just want to encourage you to keep up the good fight for all of us, you know, for the people who might not be bold enough to speak out against it. You're an inspiration to all of us. And I think you might be the only Democrat candidate that has some sanity right now. So I do applaud you for that. So again, thank you for joining the podcast. What a great discussion with Terrisa Bukovinac. She's very inspiring. Her story is amazing. I just love her fight and her drive to protect the sanctity of life. And what's a little crazy is that most people go to church and then they start growing in church, and that's when they become pro-life. But hers was the complete opposite. She left the church and then became pro-life. And I think that's very interesting. But I'll continue to pray for her that she finds her way back home, because I know that Jesus is standing there with his arms wide open, waiting for her and everyone else to just come back home. And, you know, no one is ever too far gone from the love, mercy, grace, and forgiveness of Jesus. And all you have to do is just turn to him, come back home, and you'll just be forever changed. But I truly love her and her organization, and just seeing that we can have common ground on that issue is just inspiring, especially when we have just destructive societal divisiveness today. Where we can't agree on anything, we can't even have a civil conversation. So it's just so good to have a normal conversation with someone who doesn't even remotely agree with you on 99.9% of anything, but that 0.1% we can agree and fight together to make this world a better place. So now, moving into one of my favorite parts of the podcast is video reactions, because I get to react and watch the most ridiculous things on social media, and most of these people are radical leftists who are just so lost, so morally lost, and they just need some help. So I believe it was episode 1 that I played a video and reacted to a video where you can be like season gender, right? You can identify with whatever season that, you know, just feels most connected to you. Well, now we have a new sexuality that just came out, and it's regarding nature. So we are going to take a listen to this.
Someone ecosexual. What is
Someone
it?
Ecosexual.
Sexy.
This is a growing movement that treats nature as a sensual partner, and over 100,000 people now identify
Over 100,000 people, ecosexuals.
How a person expresses their ecosexuality
Tell me.
ranges widely. From ceremonies where you can marry Mother Nature, to sex with trees, and even masturbating under waterfalls.
What? How? How do we get to this point where we just allow such degeneracy and stupidity run society? Having sex with nature, having sex with trees. What kind of mental instability do you have to think that's just normal, to think that that's okay? You don't need to be affirmed. You don't need to be, promoted on this pedestal. You need a padded room, and you need some help. And ultimately, y'all need some Jesus. This is absurd. Ecosexual. you know, this is just an entire domino effect. And unless we put a stop to it, it's just never going to end. This is just ridiculously disgusting. Next video we have, actually, it's not a video. It's a point. It's a point. Okay. So, a while ago, Dylan Mulvaney, you know, the wonderful social warrior justice for the trans agenda, who caused Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch to just lose millions and millions of dollars. He was in Peru making this video of how, you know, it's just so good to travel on my own again, and I can find myself and find my happiness. And it's great to be in a country where I feel safe, because in America, I don't feel safe. Well, Peru just passed a bill classifying trans as mentally ill people. And I applaud them. And my question is, why haven't we done that here in the United States? Why haven't we classified transgender individuals, trans in quotation marks, because you're not trans, you're just a confused man or woman. Why haven't we passed a bill defining them as mentally ill so that they can get the mental health help that they need? They desperately need this help. We can't just keep affirming delusion in society. So next up, we have a picture, and this is two men with a baby, and the guy's shirtless, holding the baby as if he's a woman, a mother, and I believe that these two men are together, and that is now their child. Could be wrong, but it's going viral on social media. Last week, we discussed how two men rented a womb of a woman so that they can create a life and that they can have a child. They ended up having two, and raise them together as two men in a relationship, a marriage, quote unquote, because we know what actual marriage is. It's actually between a man and a woman. The Bible says so. But we discussed it last week, how that is just basically child abuse. You are stripping a newborn child away from their mother at the moment of birth that they created 9 months worth of a connection to, and giving it to two men. This is human trafficking. They're actually buying this child. It's very disgusting. It's very immoral, and it should never be allowed to happen. But here we go. We have another picture. I assume it's the exact same way, and I think we just have to put a stop to it. So how to give that plug there. With that being said, I think that's just going to wrap it up for episode number 3 of this podcast. I thank you all for tuning in and listening. I hope you took something out of the discussion with Terrisa. Again, be sure to follow her. You know, even though you might not agree with any other issue that she fights for, I think this is one that we can all rally together around and just make the world a better place. Less baby murder makes the world a better place. More humans get to live, the world is a better place. So I don't know how anyone can really argue that. But this is such an important issue to me, and a topic that I really care deeply about. So we're going to be having other guests on throughout this podcast series, discussing it, just going in deeper about the different issues within the abortion movement, the abortion industry, and just hearing other people's stories, because I think it's probably one of the top issues that is changing our society right now, and elections are being focused on this, especially on the radical left. So we're going to be hearing a lot more from this topic and the issue of pro-life and anti-abortion coming soon. But next week, again, don't forget to tune in. We have Lucas Miles, the author of The Christian Left, and he also came out with a new book, Woke Jesus. We're going to be having him back on at a later time to discuss that book. But I thought it was a perfect opportunity to share with you guys his vision, his outline for how America has just gone so far downhill. And it all started with taking God out of society, and now just look where we're at. And the radical left is trying to change the culture. They're trying to change biblical principles and biblical truths and make Jesus to be this person that he wasn't, to make God this person that he's not. And it's just such a good read. I'm on my second time reading it because I have to refresh everything so I can take notes. But it's just so good. So we're going to be having him next week on the Battle Belongs podcast. I will see you guys next week. Hopefully I don't die at my tennis tournament. Take care.